שלום לכולם. Hello everyone. Hi, Geshe.
Hi, Geshe. Hi, everyone. Shalom.
שלום לכולם. Hello everyone. Hi, Geshe.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, okay, good. Great. Okay, so it's 7 o'clock. Shall we start? Okay,
Yeah.
can you see me clearly enough? Not too far away? Not too... Okay. All right, let's start as usual with a few moments of breathing. Okay. All right. And then, as you know, setting up the motivation. And then, in order to generate the right kind of motivation, to take a few moments to generate a loving attitude that wishes for all sentient beings to be free from suffering, from any type of limitation, mental as well as physical. And then generate the wish, may I be able to liberate all sentient beings, to assist them in freeing themselves from any type of limitation, any type of mental and physical obstacles. And then generate the determination, the altruistic attitude. I will do whatever I can to assist sentient beings in liberating them, or in their effort to liberate themselves from all their mental and physical hindrances. And then lastly, as a means to an end, may I become a Buddha for the welfare of all sentient beings. And may this session that we have tonight, may that become one of the causes for my own enlightenment, for the welfare of all sentient beings. I just need to quickly switch off something here, otherwise it'll make a lot of noise. I just realized. Okay. All right, so where did we get to? Well, still with the Heart Sutra, didn't get very far last time. Just to summarize, so, well, we're with the Buddha right now, the Buddha in the presence of, well, not just the great enlightened Buddha, who's such an inspiration for us, such a great example, but also in the presence of many wonderful bodhisattvas, lay practitioners, monks, nuns, and so forth. And of course, also in the presence of Avalokiteshvara and Shariputra. Shariputra being symbolic for the foundational vehicle, the foundation of our practice, the Pali tradition. And then, of course, Avalokiteshvara, the great bodhisattva, the Mahasattva, symbolic for the sutra being a teaching of the of the Sanskrit tradition. So the focus on enlightenment, and of course, also Shariputra's question: how should someone who is of the lineage of the Mahayana lineage, so someone who has at least generated great compassion, how should they practice wisdom? And then, of course, Avalokiteshvara's response, saying, well, wisdom should be practiced through understanding that the I doesn't exist inherently or independently or objectively, and neither do all the factors based on which the I is merely labeled. So the body, feelings, discrimination, and so forth. None of those, so mind and body, they don't exist inherently. Giving that kind of general explanation, or making that general statement, and then of course explaining why through the 4 profundities and the 8 profundities, or 8 aspects. All right, so the explanation that's far. So until this point, explicitly, of course, it's been all about emptiness, but then implicitly the path also sets forth the path of accumulation, the path of preparation, and the path of seeing. So those first 3 levels. And the last level, of course, is when a bodhisattva realizes emptiness directly, experiences emptiness. And now, of course, the bodhisattva has to become familiar with that direct experience of emptiness. And that is, that, therefore, from now onwards, and also already from what we did last time, implicitly, the text deals with the path of meditation, of familiarizing the mind with the direct realization of emptiness. That's the implicit explanation. But of course, explicitly, last time it talked about, for instance, how we cycle in samsara, or what cycles in samsara, what it is that cycles in samsara. And that is the person, it's the 5 aggregates. I forgot to bring out one text. Well, I can look here. Anyway, so let me just quickly check something. So what is samsara? Well, samsara is basically the 5 aggregates. We talked about this extensively last time. Just a sec. Okay. I need to just look something up. So we talked about it last time very extensively, what the 5 aggregates are, etc. Okay. Just a sec. Okay, here it comes. All right. So yes, what I just said. Oh yeah. First of all, yes. So recognizing first of all what samsara is. So samsara refers to our mind and body. And now, who experiences suffering? That's the next aspect. So who experiences suffering? And also, well, so samsara, what is samsara? Who experiences samsara? And then as well, how does this happen? How do we experience samsara? And that is expressed by the following, okay, I need to go back, is explained by the following aspects. So Shariputra, likewise, no. Therefore, in emptiness, there's no form, no feeling, no discrimination, no compositional factors. Okay. And then it goes on to say, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no, that's it. No consciousness that far. That's the 5 skandhas or the 5 aggregates. And then it goes on to say, no ear, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no visual form, no sound, no odor, no taste, no object of touch, and no phenomenon. Now, those are 12. Those are 12 aspects, and those 12 aspects are described as the 12 sense sources. The 12 sense sources. So the source for our perception and senses does not strictly only refer to the sense consciousnesses, but it includes any kind of perception. So it includes also the 6th consciousness and its objects. All right. So eye refers to the perception through an eye consciousness, though eye here, it basically means the sense power, that which is responsible for perceiving things with your eye consciousness. So on a physical level for a person, it's the eye sense power. Anything on a physical level, the eye itself, parts of the brain, visual cortex, whatever is responsible for us being able to see something. So that's the physical basis that we ourselves possess. And then no ear or ear itself. So it basically, of course, it talks about the emptiness of those, but it also implies that the way we get in touch with reality is, of course, through our consciousness. And what is it that enables us to get in touch with the external world, with other people around us? What is responsible are the eye sense power, the ear sense power. So ear, nose, tongue, and body, which is basically saying we have the 5 sense consciousnesses, and on the physical level, you need the nerves, you need whatever you need as part of your body to be able to perceive objects with your sense consciousnesses. Okay, so the 5 that are called the 5 sense powers. Those are the first 5: eye, ear, nose, tongue, body. Saying I, when we hear the word I, we may, well, naturally feel I refers to just the eyeball. But strictly speaking, in Buddhist philosophy, when we talk about the eye sense power, it doesn't just mean the eyeball, because even a blind person has an eyeball, may have an eyeball, but it's a fully functioning eyeball. So it's more than that. It's the ability to see something, and it refers to whatever is part of that. I guess also the subtle energy in the body, that's also responsible for that. And I'm mentioning that because it said that the eye sense power goes from life to life. So what is it exactly that goes from life to life? And it's the subtle energy that travels in the mind. So I guess that's also part of it. That which travels on to the next life is, of course, the subtle mind with the subtle energy. And that would explain how, if this is also part of the energy, the ability to see something is also dependent on the energy in our body. Well, that continues from life to life. Anyway, so from the word I, or no I, until no body, it refers to the physical sense sources, basically. And then no mind, well, mind here, the after no body, then no mind. No mind refers to the mental consciousness, because the mental consciousness does not require any physical base, doesn't require an eye sense power, ear sense power, and so forth. What it requires, it's an earlier moment of consciousness. So another mind, an earlier moment of consciousness. So in order for myself to have a perception in the present, so with the eye consciousness to see shape and color, ear consciousness, and so forth, all the way to a mental consciousness perceiving anything. Anything. It's not restricted to the sense objects. I need an eye sense power, an ear sense power, a nose sense power, tongue power, tongue sense power, a body sense power, and a mental sense power. Okay, so those must precede these 6 consciousnesses in order for me now to perceive something with those 6. And those 6 are present right now. They're active right now. And so I can perceive the world around me through the 5 sense objects, through the 5 sense awarenesses. Plus, I can think about what I see, I label, I judge, etc. I do everything that I do with my mental consciousness, again, based on a former moment of awareness. Okay, so therefore, the first 6, eye to mind, are the sense bases. They're like the sense powers. Okay, the sense powers, what we need from our side for a moment later to have a sense perception. And then, in order to have the sense perception, we also need objects. So it goes on: visual form, sound, odor, taste, object of touch, and phenomena in general. So those are the next 6 aspects, or the 6 objects here. So in other words, in order for me to be able to perceive something, I need the 5 sense powers, 6 sense powers, and the 6 objects. Okay, and the sixth sense power here, like I said, it's actually just the mental consciousness a moment earlier, which then causes the mental consciousness right now. Okay, and as said earlier on, the eye sense power causes the eye consciousness right now, an earlier moment of an eye sense power, an earlier moment of an ear sense power, etc., causes an eye consciousness, an ear consciousness, etc., right now. But of course, we also need objects. Without objects, we couldn't perceive. I mean, the mind is not fully functioning because the mind always has an object. So an eye consciousness has an object, an ear consciousness has, all the way to the mental consciousness, which has an object. So while we're awake, that's the situation. When we're asleep, the sense consciousnesses are no longer there. It's only the mental consciousness that is active. But of course, most of what we're aware of in our life, of course, we sleep every night, but we're not really aware what's going on during our sleep. So it's during our waking state, those six sense sources, as in like sources for our perception, they basically enable us to make sense of the world. And of course, also, how do we cycle in samsara? It's part of that. Well, our perception of what's going on around us, of course. It gives rise to thoughts, etc., actions, and so forth. So really, all day long, it's the sense perceptions prevalent. That's the prevalent aspect. Through the sense perception, we perceive what's going on around us. And then, of course, the mental consciousness, labeling, that's the basic function of the mind, thinking it's this, it's that, etc. But of course, to be more specific, it judges, it classifies, it doubts, it gets angry, it's loving, etc. Okay, in each moment, with each conceptual, these are all conceptual minds. So thoughts, in other words, they're all thoughts. And those basically, with every thought, we're labeling. We're thinking it's this, it's that, it's good, it's bad, I want it, I don't want it, and so forth. All right. And here, what is Avalokiteshvara explaining? Well, explicitly, of course, that they don't exist inherently, they don't exist intrinsically, but implicitly, of course, he talks about those things nonetheless existing and being responsible for us being in samsara, basically. Well, they're not the main parts that's there. I mean, of course, it's our misapprehension of reality that is mainly responsible for us being in the situation we're in. But what enables us, or what is one of the other causes that keeps us in samsara, is our sense perception, is of, well, making sense of the world around us, perceiving the world around us through the five senses, five sense awarenesses. And of course, as I said early on, to think about, to label, etc., with the sixth consciousness. Okay, so therefore, after Avalokiteshvara talks about the five skandhas, the five aggregates that we discussed last time, now here he talks about the 12 sense sources, implicitly saying, well, these are part of the process of us being in this state called cyclic existence. All right. And then implicitly saying that, explicitly, of course, saying none of those exist inherently. In what way do they not exist inherently? Well, if you talk about this, the I sense power, what did I say? What is the I sense power? Well, anything on the physical basis. On the physical basis, we talk about not just the eyeball itself, but the fully functioning eyeball, the nerves, the function of the nerves, the parts of the brain that are responsible for seeing something, optical nerve, the visual cortex, and so forth, and plus the energy in our body that enables this process, whatever energy there is in the body, electrical, whatever current, etc., with the optical nerve, all this taken together, we label I sense power. So it's just labeled on the basis of all these different aspects, where none of these aspects, of course, is the I sense power. The I sense power doesn't exist separate from those. It's also not all of those parts together. It's basically just the label we give to all these aspects that perform a certain function. Therefore, inherently, there's no I sense power, but conventionally there is. And plus, of course, with an I sense power, there's also an object here, the visual form. Okay, again, is there a visual form that exists in and of itself? Well, no, it's mainly labeled on the fact that we see it. It wouldn't be a visual form. It wouldn't be a visual form unless we saw it. Visual implies it's being seen. So it's merely labeled on the basis of its parts, shape, color, etc. So, and of course, again, when we take into consideration modern physics, what we see, our visual object, of course, doesn't exist exactly the way we perceive it because of light waves, etc., that we're not aware of, but that as a result of their length, length, we perceive green, red, blue, and so forth. Okay, so we label visual object, visual form, on the basis of all these aspects coming together, performing a certain function. All right. So there's explicitly, it talks about them not existing inherently. Implicitly, the 12 sense sources, and I just repeat, the 12 sense sources are the 5 sense sources. So whatever we need in our body for sense perception to take place, plus the mental consciousness itself, which we need in order for for mental consciousness to arise. Okay. And then, of course, the 6 objects that I need, again, for the 5 sense consciousnesses and the mental consciousness to arise. Okay, I hope this is not too confusing. You have the eye sense power, ear sense power, nose sense power, tongue sense power, and body sense power, plus mental consciousness. Then there are objects, visual form, sound, odor, taste, object of touch, and then phenomena, which refer to exactly each of those 5 sense bases or 5 sense powers, enabling us to see visual forms with our eye consciousness, perceive sounds with our ear consciousness, all the way to perceiving any type of phenomenon with our mind, with our mental consciousness. Right? So this is a way to talk about the mind. So what is it that makes up our consciousness? Well, there are different ways of dividing it. Here it's from the point of view of sense perception and mental consciousness. And that keeps us busy all day long. We are busy with perceiving, of course, the sense objects and then reacting to them. And because of our misapprehension of reality, we perceive visual forms to exist in and of themselves, sounds to exist in and of themselves. And depending on the emotion that goes, or the feeling that goes along with each of these perceptions, our mental consciousness generates attachment or aversion towards whatever we perceive. Okay, so therefore, these 12, basically on a more physical level, not describing the awarenesses themselves, but just describing their causes. They enable us to perceive things, but also, of course, keep us spinning within samsara because of craving for positive sights, positive sounds, etc., desirable sights, etc. And then the next part talks about there's no I element and so on, up to including no mind element and no mental consciousness. Now, this is just a short version, or a quick version, if you like, of talking about the 18 constituents, which is really like almost saying the same as before. It's just a more extensive version of the explanation that was given before. So first, the shortest form of explaining how we get in touch with the world around us is, of course, through the 5 aggregates, but more specifically, the 12 sense sources, okay, the 6 sense powers and the respective objects, right? And now a more extensive version of those is taking those 12 we've already mentioned and adding the respective consciousnesses to them. So in my explanation, I've already added them, but here specifically you add the consciousness, the different types of awareness. Now, if we go to the text that I originally sent you, there's a chart. There's a brief outline. No, that's not it. There's a chart. Let me just check. Oh yeah, here. The 5 aggregates. Here it goes. Yeah. Maybe we could share, if you could put the 5 aggregates, 12 sources, and 18 constituents on the screen. Let me just see what it's called. Yeah, it's called HS chart, 5 aggregates, 12 sources, and 18 constituents. If you see that, if you have it on the screen, it may be easier.
Can you give me the number?
Okay, I sent give you a number with them. I don't remember what the numbers that I sent you.
So can you just give me the name again? Sorry.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect.
That's it. Great. Yes. All right. So they have this lovely chart that they made. Okay. So here you can see. All right. It's a little confusing. But in the very center, eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, so the sense consciousnesses and the mental consciousness, yes, in the very center. Okay. Yes, great. Make sure explaining it right. Okay. So in the lower part, you see feeling, so non-revelatory form, feeling, Feeling aggregate. I don't know why there's this non-revelatory. I don't understand that. Non-revelatory. Form. It's basically form, feeling, discrimination, compositional factor, and then there should be consciousness. I don't really understand that. Uncompounded phenomena. Well, permanent phenomena. It includes permanent phenomena. And then mental consciousness is in the center. Okay, so here, this chart is talking about, well, anything that makes up as a person, plus it includes even permanent phenomena. I mean, of course, if you have impermanent phenomena, you also have permanent ones. So the emptiness of our own body is part of us, and that's a permanent phenomenon. But if you look in the lower yellow part, it talks about consciousness, okay, mental sense power, consciousness, and then your form, feeling, discrimination, compositional factor, and permanent phenomena. That's who we are as a person. All right. And then if you look in the upper part, it describes, well, eye sense power, eye, ear, nose, tongue, and body as part of the yellow rim. Okay, you've got the yellow rim, eye, ear, nose. Okay, so those are the physical sense powers. And then you have the different forms. They talk about 20 different forms, colors, shapes. We don't need to go into all these forms. It's too complicated. 8 sounds, man-made sound, naturally occurring sounds, etc. Then the 4 types of smells, 6 types of tastes, and 11 tangible objects. All right. So in other words, you have the different forms, the visual forms, including colors and shapes, coming together with the eye sense power. Then you have these different sounds coming together with the ear sense powers, the different smells coming together with the nose sense power, the different tastes coming together with the tongue sense power, and the tangible objects coming together with the body consciousness. And then for the mental consciousness, any type of phenomenon coming together with the mental consciousness. All right. And so then we have a mental perception of all those. Okay. And this picture, maybe I would have done it a little differently, but never mind. So this includes the 5 aggregates, the 12 sense sources, and the 18 constituents. So if you can go a little bit up, like there's like a whole chart, a little bit, sorry, down, not up. Sorry, yeah, there, it's right there. So there it shows us the 5 aggregates: form, feeling, discrimination, compositional factor, and consciousness in the green box. And in the yellow box, the 12 sources, okay, the 6 external objects, then the internal sense powers, and then the 18 constituents, which again includes the 12 sources, plus the 6 types of consciousnesses which arise as a result of those. So the 12 sources are here seen from the point of view of causes. An earlier moment, a moment earlier, you must have those external objects a moment earlier, and then you have the sense sources, okay, sense sources, and those then give rise to, of the 8 constituents, the last 6. All right. I know it's a little bit complicated if you're not that familiar with them, but it's basically just saying we need certain causes for perception to take place. So although consciousness is that which, of course, is responsible for all our experiences, so really consciousness and experience are the same thing. Anything like our reality goes back to our mind. In the West, we oftentimes think of experience as being the brain, but the brain, of course, being so important, being so crucial, but that's not the experience. That's just the physical basis that makes our perception of objects possible, yes, but it's not identical with our mind. So our reality all takes place within the mind, but this mind doesn't function just on its own. It needs other factors, other things that precede it. So in the case of sense perception, you need objects and sense powers. And in the case of the mental consciousness, you don't need as well, it's still called sense power, but it's not a sense power in the strictest sense of the word. It's not a physical basis. It's just a previous moment of consciousness. And any phenomenon will do. Any phenomenon can appear to that mind, can be perceived by that mind. And so once you understand that each consciousness needs a sense power, a preceding sense power plus an object, and from there you can know the 18 constituents which mention those 12 sources plus the consciousness itself. Okay. Now you may wonder, why not say this in a different way? This is so complicated. But of course, it is only complicated for us because as part of our culture, as part of our study, we don't learn this. My guess is in India, when the Buddha taught this was already an existent system of how perception takes place. And so therefore it made sense to people. All right. So let me just double check whether there are any questions. If you look at this, are there any questions? I'm just looking at the form, 5 physical sense objects, physical sense powers. Yeah, so the 5 aggregates, they need to be explained here. The 5 aggregates, the way they're described in this chart, it's very specific, where it includes actually not just the body, it includes any physical form. There is a way in which you can talk about the 5 aggregates as including everything that exists, where the material world is included in form, and the rest is the same. It's the mental aspect. So anything that is not included, of course, in the form, in the physical world, basically, of course, refers to mind, and then it refers to a person again. Yeah. So the 5 aggregates, as it's described here, the 5 sense objects are also included as part of the 5 aggregates. If you see the 5 aggregates in this large way, in which it includes all phenomena. Okay. So the way we're used to the 5 aggregates is talking about body and mind as in like a person, but that's not the only way. There is a way in which you can include anything that exists, and anything that exists, well, the mind is already part of the person. So anything that exists can only include the physical world, and that is part of the body aggregate, the form aggregate, I should say. So not body aggregate, but more specifically, form aggregate. Okay, that's the more extensive way. And more specific, it would only refer to a person's body or anything physical that's part of the person that's not mental. All right, and this is why in this chart it even mentions something that's called non-revelatory form. In this little box, maybe Sherry, you could show it one more time. I can explain those different ones here, which you may find interesting, this non-revelatory form. Okay, can you see in the first green box, it says form, there are 11 types, 5 physical sense objects. If you say form refers to also the outside physical world, then the 5 physical sense powers, they're part of a person's body, of course, with the last one actually referring to the entire body, the body sense power. And then there's something called non-revelatory form. In Tibetan, the word is basically form that we can ordinarily know and form that we ordinarily don't know. So in other words, coarser type of form is revelatory form, so form that we can easily, physical object that we can easily know. And non-revelatory, I don't know why they say non-revelatory. I guess maybe the Sanskrit word has that meaning, because the Tibetan word has more the meaning of form that cannot be known easily by an ordinary person. So very subtle form, very subtle form. And in the Prasangika school, there you find the explanation that there are certain aspects that are part of us that are very subtle form. For instance, karma. Karma can be physical. So, of course, this requires some explanation because we use the word karma in a way which can be confusing. I think I've mentioned this before, that usually karma, strictly speaking, refers to the action. Karma means literally action. And when we say, oh, I have this experience, that's my karma, we use the word karma by taking the name of the cause, which is the action, and give that to the result, the karmic action, the karmic experience, right? We say, oh, it's my karma. Whatever, I have a positive experience, oh, that's my karma. I have a negative karma experience, that's my karma. That's actually only the karmic result. Strictly speaking, that's the karmic result, but that's all right. I don't know whether I mentioned this in this class or in a different one, but I remember I talked about before, well, probably in a different one. For instance, when you say you get a lot of sun, I have a lot of sun in my room. That is another example where you give the name of the cause to the result. Okay? You don't get sun in your room, you have sun rays in your room. Okay? Because if you had the sun in your room would be there, it will be burned up. So, sun in the room, actually, we have the result of the sun rays. We have those in our room, but we give the name of the cause, the sun, that's the cause of the sun rays, to the result, the sun rays. Okay? So likewise, we do the same with karma. We say it's my karma, but actually what I mean, this is the result of a karma I accumulated in the past. And no one is criticizing this. No one is saying this is wrong. No one is saying this is wrong to use it that way. It's perfectly all right to use it that way. It's just to be aware that karma, strictly speaking, refers to the action. All right. And then there's more to it. There's more to karma. Because there's the action and there's the result. So what's in between? What's in between? Like, this is like a whole matter. This is why in many of the non-Buddhist philosophical systems, philosophers talked about Atman, about a self, because they said the action I accumulate at some point will lead to an experience in the future. So that's another way of saying karma. But what's in between? What keeps those two together? The action and the result. You must have some stable basis that enables whatever residue there's left to stay until it ripens. So that's why in many of the non-Buddhist philosophical system, they talked about a permanent I. There's a permanent soul, and all the karmic residues, they're left on that permanent soul. Of course, from a Buddhist point of view, there is no permanent I. There is no separate I anyway, which makes it harder for a Buddhist philosopher to talk about the cause, the karmic cause, and then the result, a certain experience. So what is in between? Okay, so in between, of course, you have consciousness. You have a stream of consciousness. Just as a river, it's like a stream that's changing moment by moment, and it can still have fish swimming within it, fish remaining within it, different objects remaining within it. It's not necessary that for a river to hold something, that it has to be permanent. And even we call it river from moment to moment, and we may say, well, it's a river in each moment. Well, we just call it that from moment to moment. There's nothing constant in that river. It's constantly changing, but we just keep referring to it as river, as water. Similarly with consciousness, we keep calling it consciousness, but each moment of experience is different from the earlier moment. And it carries, just as a river can carry objects with it, it carries the residue of our actions. It carries the residues of our actions. So any moment I have certain thoughts, I think about something, I plan to benefit someone or I plan to harm someone, and all that leaves a residue in our mind. Now, of course, we need to be aware that when we hear this, we hear the word imprints. It leaves something in the mind. So because we can't really imagine what is that, we use a visual term, a term that actually suggests something visual, an imprint. It's literally the Tibetan word imprint. When you have snow or sand, and you step through the sand or through the snow, and it leaves an imprint. It leaves a residue that corresponds to the footprint. In other words, you leave a residue when you engage in a calming action of the mind. You leave a residue that corresponds to the action. You leave something behind. That's just another way of saying you leave something behind. And I remember in the past, I used to think it was like little dots I leave in the mind. I thought of my mind like a golf ball with all these dots, like these imprints. I literally thought of imprints, my mind like being, and my teachers reminded me, like, don't think of this like that. That is like thinking of your imprints being like kneddelach, right? Little kneddelach, like little solid things that you can find in your mind. It's not like that. It's just the name we give to those changes in the mind. So every action we accumulate, it changes the mind, right? And that change cannot be found in the form of some kind of dots, etc. The entire mind is basically not the same as before, but since it's just an experiencing non-physical entity, there's nothing to pinpoint at. This is how it's different. But every action of the mind has changed the entire mind, and that change, that is the result of an action previously, that is described as imprint. Okay, or potential, whichever word you want to use. It's very difficult to really understand that because it's not something we can perceive with our senses. All right, but that is this connection between the action and the result, the experience. So every time we have a thought, it leaves a residue. It does not get lost. And that thought then leads to the different experiences we have. And in particular, when we understand, we had all this discussion before, that all our experiences are subjective, that makes total sense. In an objective world, it doesn't make sense. In an objective world, to say, I have a thought, it leaves something behind, and that's responsible for my experiences, it doesn't make sense. In an objective world, there's randomness, things just happen, and we just experience them. But if things are subjective, and the evidence points towards it, all the reasoning we did before, all this points in the direction that whatever there is in this world is totally subjective. And then it makes sense that any thought we have is part of the subjective world, which through the quality of this thought leads to certain experiences. And again, in and of themselves, they're neither positive nor negative. They just correspond to the action, the mental thought. And if it's done, for instance, with the intention to benefit someone, to bring happiness to someone, well, then the experience is a happy experience. If it's with the motivation, if the thoughts are involved, where are connected to the wish to harm someone, to bring suffering to someone, then it leads to suffering. All right, so that's what happens on the mental basis. But it actually, what I've described so far are only mental actions. I've not described physical actions. And physical actions include, they're twofold: actions of body and action of speech. And this is where it gets a little complicated. So actions of speech can be divided into what happens on a mental basis and what happens on the verbal basis, right? Actions of speech. If you just talk without any thoughts, like some kind of reflex, that's a whole different matter. But if I intentionally say something, then in that case, you have the mental factor of, I want to say this, I'm going to say that. And that's just very brief. You may not even notice that there's a brief moment of wanting to say something, but there is a mental aspect, and that is called mental action, mental karma. But there's the physical speaking as well, not to be disconnected from what's happening on the mental basis, but there's still a physical action of speaking, and that's physical. And that is form, or to use another words, it's a physicality, it's something physical. Likewise, when you act with your body intentionally, of course, I'm not talking about reflexes here, but intentionally you act with your body. In that case, the mental aspect, of course, is also there, but the mental, the planning and the execution of some physical action, killing someone, for instance, the mental action, that is purely mental karma. But of course, it makes the physical action positive or negative. It depends on the intention. So, therefore, the intention, the thought behind that, makes the physical action, like pulling someone's tooth, can be something very positive, can be something very negative. It's a connection to the mental karma that the physical action of pulling someone's tooth becomes positive or negative. But this physical act of pulling someone's tooth is a physical karma. It's physical. Okay, it's a physical action that can be perceived with the sense awarenesses. It's not mental. But the mental karma runs parallel to the physical action. Does that make sense? So you have mental karma that first of all is accumulated at the same time as the physical karma, but also determines whether the physical karma is positive or negative. All right. Now, in this school, they say that the physical karma leaves behind non-revelatory form. It leaves behind, after the action is complete, the words have been said and the physical action has been completed. Okay, in the case of killing, for instance, it leaves behind something, a non-revelatory form, a very subtle form. Non-revelatory means basically difficult for us to perceive. Something is left. Okay, and that is a little bit difficult because that form of body and speech is carried on to the next life. It's carried on to the next life. So, of course, the mental karma anyway, in the form of imprints, that's pretty simple because the mind goes on, it becomes subtler, but never mind, a subtle mind, a coarse mind, even the water of the river doesn't have as many waves, it still carries the fish. So you have a very wave, like water with lots of waves, that's kind of the coarse mind. And at times it becomes subtler, so the waves are stiller, but it still carries objects with it. So likewise with mental actions that are left on the mind carries those with them, these residues, no problem. But what carries the residue of physical actions, such as actions of the body and actions of the speech? And I've thought about this a lot, and I don't think in the sutric system this can be explained properly, but in the tantric system you find an answer. I believe it's the energy in our body, it's the physical energy. So when you practice Chinese medicine or Tibetan medicine, or I guess also Ayurvedic medicine, there's a lot of talk about physical energies in the body, and those energies, they exist definitely. The Buddha himself talked about them as a basis for the mind. Our mind influences these energies, energies influence the body. So here we're not strictly speaking about the coarse body, that's revelatory form. You can easily see the parts of the body, the organs, etc., if we open the body up, of course. But other than skin being a hindrance, there's no hindrance, just we can easily perceive them. This is called revelatory form, easily perceivable form. But then you have non-revelatory form, so such as the subtle energy. They don't reveal themselves easily to us. We're not easily aware of them. And so my belief is that all our actions of body and speech, they leave behind an energy. And so they change the energy of our body. And in fact, it explains in the tantric systems a lot of explanation of energies of a place being affected by the people within them, etc. And that explains why Jerusalem is such a special place, right? You have the Jerusalem syndrome. You have all this incredible, what you find in Jerusalem, because people come there with very strong energies, religiously, spiritually influence, very strong energies, and they have an influence on the place because the whole world is based on subtle energies. And of course, there's coarser ones that we can perceive, but also the very subtle ones. Anyway, my point is non-revelatory form means our body comes along with a coarse form that we can perceive, but also subtler form. And that includes the residue of our physical actions, which means actions of body and speech. And those are carried on with the energy in our body, and they lead to certain experiences again, experiences that correspond to actions of body and speech. Does that make sense? So, of course, subjectively, it's all the subjective experience. In the end, it's my experience that is the main aspect of them, but they connect to body and speech. All right, so that's basically who we are. My actions right now leave residues, non-revelatory form, body and speech, and of course mental imprints, mental residues, and then they were left with the mind, and they account for my future experiences. And that's again how we remain in samsara. And how does that take place? Am I in a little bubble? Of course not. I'm not in a bubble. I have sense powers, I have objects, right? And they're mainly responsible. They help me to interact with the world. So the 12 sense sources. And that then leads to the 18 constituents, which is the sense sources plus the 6 sense consciousnesses. So yeah, right there, here they are. So in that way, we can understand how we cycle within samsara. Okay. Oh yeah, it's like a whole list of different things. The 2, the 6, the 5 feelings, etc. I don't think there's enough time. This is like Abhidharma study. That's like Abhidharma, big time. To go into all these different ones, I don't think there's any need. I mean, for the 6 type of discrimination, the 5 types of feelings, 40 mental factors, that's Nordic, that's different topics we don't need to go into. But I hope that this part of the text has become a little clearer. So what is samsara? Okay, number 1, what is samsara? The 5 skandhas, of course. Who experiences samsara? Of course, the 5 skandhas. And then how does this take place? And that is explained through the 12 sense sources, as well as the 18 constituents. All right. And then, of course, how exactly does this take place? By way of the 12 links of dependent arising. All right. The 12 links of dependent arising. They are quite difficult, but I want to go into them, but maybe not today. And I've found a way to explain them that doesn't require that much time. I think within one class, we can go over them just briefly, not into all details, but just to get a sense how they help us to understand the procedure of going from A to Z, basically. Okay, all right. But before we continue, I'm not sure there's anything more to be said. Of course, the emptiness of all those, the 18 constituents, etc. But we've already said that. We basically talked about this in great length, that form is empty, lacks inherent existence, therefore it's possible. Emptiness is form, so anything is possible because it lacks inherent existence. And then, of course, the emptiness of an object cannot be separated from the object. Still, it's not the conventional truth, the object itself. Its ultimate truth is nominally different. We've talked about this aspect. Likewise, we talked about the eight kind of aspects in terms of the existence of an object, the causes of an object, the results of an object. Nothing exists inherently. And like I said, here, this part of the text that starts with those words, likewise, I have to go back to my own text. Sorry. Yes, Shariputra, likewise, therefore, in emptiness, there's no form, no feeling, no discrimination, no composition of factors, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose. So here, explicitly, we're just familiarizing ourselves with the lack of inherent existence of all these objects, but implicitly, it talks about what samsara is, who experiences samsara, and how we remain within samsara. What are the aspects of samsara? Okay. Now, any questions? I hope this was not too confusing. Any questions you have about? Yes?
Yeah,
Yes?
there is a question from Varda. And
Varda, yes?
She asked, is the non-revelatory form what helps us, what helps our memory?
What helps us to understand it?
I'm not sure, I'm just reading
Memory?
the question.
What helps our memory?
Is the non-revelatory form is what helps our memory?
Is that responsible for memory? If I understand it correctly, I don't think, no. You see, non-revelatory are just it's just the residue that's left by the actual physical actions. But what helps our memory are imprints left in our mind. So memory comes from, well, you see, imprints, the word imprint is just this one term we have. And I believe that each imprint, each residue performs many different functions. It's the same kind of residue. It performs the function of enabling us to remember. It performs the function of what do you call it? Familiarity, familiarizing ourselves. It performs the function of leading to experiences, karmic experiences. So it's a single residue left by a thought, and it performs all these different functions. It has different functions, just as the body, it's a single body, but it performs different functions. It can do different things. So likewise, every mental residue, every thought we have, it leaves something behind, and that can affect memory. It affects familiarity, right? I mean, one thought I have today, I have it the next day again. It leaves something behind, so that, let's take anger, right? If you're usually not an angry person, you've not been angry for like month on end, and then something bothers you, you lose your patience, you get really angry, okay? And then the anger subsides. And lo and behold, the next day it's easier to get angry, right? And then the next time, and the next time, and the anger's gone. From yesterday until today, the whole day I wasn't angry, but I'm quicker angry. There's something left on the mind, and again, it's called imprint, but here with the function of familiarity. Okay, and likewise, love and compassion, it works the same way. You generate love and compassion, you make an effort, and again, it leaves something behind. And next time you meditate on love and compassion, it's easier, and it gets easier and easier because of those residues. Your love is stronger, your compassion is stronger. Okay, so that's the aspect of familiarity. But of course, it also enables you to have memory, have remembrance of the object of your love, a memory of your love itself. Of course, you can't separate the love and the object, but you can remember both, that you had love and the object of your love. That's also part of the residue. That's also responsible, the residue that's left. It leads to karmic experiences, such that, well, you're loved, you experience love by someone else as a result of having loved yourself. So whatever is left on the mind, every thought leaves something, and we label that residue, we label that imprint based on the fact what it affects in the future. All right, so karmic experiences, familiarity, and memory, and that's all coming from the mental imprints. It's not the physical. Okay? I don't think it's the physical. It can affect our memory, but I think strictly speaking, it's the mental imprints that are left. Yeah. Okay, more questions?
Yes, I see there is Maya.
Maya, please go ahead. Yeah.
Hey, Geshe. Thank you so much. I was just wondering, what exactly is something that I'm trying to understand. So I understand that we have different types of minds and we have the subtle mind that goes on and so on. But what I'm trying to figure out, with all of this, what makes it, my mind? What makes it go in that form and push it away for the next life? I just, I'm trying to figure that out, and maybe there is something I don't understand correctly, but it's like I understand that we have different way of characteristics and so on, and we have the subtle mind and a very subtle mind. But what makes it, go in this shape next to the next life? I I'm trying to.
Okay. I don't know. I'm not sure I understand it correctly. I think I do understand, but I'm not 100% sure. It almost feels like you need something to keep it together. Like, first of all, how can it not disperse? Number one, and secondly, how does it make it my mind and not another person's mind? Well, I think the latter part is easier in the sense that your thoughts lead to certain experiences. It's not someone else's thoughts. It's not someone else's actions of mind, right? Another person's thought can only influence you by the result of those. So the thoughts of another person may express themselves in their face, in what they say, right? But the thoughts themselves, or maybe the energy that they create, that affects you on a very subtle level. But other than that, the thoughts themselves do not affect you. Okay? It's only indirectly through what these thoughts cause that then interact with you and so. But your thoughts, this continuum of thoughts lead to your personal experiences. Of course, that takes you right away. You're not the same from moment to moment, right? Yeah. It's not the same person. All right, but that's a whole different discussion. Yeah, it's still a continuum where former moments affect later moments. Former moments affect later moments. And that kind of a former moment, former thoughts result in certain experiences that is only true for that mind. Your thoughts will not affect my experiences unless I create similar thoughts as a result of you saying something or whatever, right? So your thoughts in itself, if you don't act on them, and I'm not anywhere near you seeing your expression as a result of those thoughts, they will not affect my experiences, only your experience. So from that point of view, that entity that continues on in the form of mental actions leading to experiences, we can say, based on that, we label your. Okay? In the case of mine, I label mine. Now, what keeps it together? Well, it's not a physical entity that needs to be kept together like a room full of marbles, right? If you have a room full of little pearls, you need to keep them together for them to continue together in that form. If you think of your mind like something physical, like lots of different kind of, I don't know, little, what do you want to, like little, what's the word for them? These little insects that glow in the dark, what are they called?
Fireflies.
Fireflies, that's right. So if you have a whole bunch of fireflies, right, you have to keep them together because they disperse and you have to keep them together. But the mind is not like that. So the mind just continues as an experiencing entity where one moment gives rise to the next, gives rise to the next, gives rise to the next. And that we label mind. An experiencing entity that always has an object, right, that always perceives and even more so apprehends, doubts, etc., does different things with the object, that we call mind. And that just on its own continues on. And the difference between yours, like I just said, between your mind and my mind is, well, what I just said, the thoughts, etc.
Yeah.
And that is carried on. And when it connects to a new body, we say new life. That's the word, that's the label we give. We say rebirth, right? It's not like a little Kneddelach is thrown into a new body or anything, as we may imagine, because it seems so concrete, right? There's this mind, there's this body, they connect. It's not as concrete as it seems. There's just this perception, this perceiving entity that now connects with a physical entity that slowly grows, and they have this connection that they maintain until this karmic connection, as we call it, karmic connection, until that is over and they separate again. And this entity, since it's an experiencing entity, it gives rise to a next moment, and there's nothing that can destroy it.
Yeah, I was just wondering why is this, like, why is this happening in that way? You know, what's the, I'm trying to, you know, like in Hindu day we say there is an Atman that, like, I don't know if Atman, that's
Yeah,
I don't remember.
Atman is a permanent self, a permanent I.
Or like something that is like a big thing that we are all part of in a way, and then from there we go out. I don't know exactly. I'm just trying to understand why is this energy that is me right now, yeah, and my body, my mind, everything together, why is this shaped in that form? You know, what makes it? You know,
you can ask
I
the
don't know
same
if
question, why is there this Atman? The question why is there God, right? I mean, if you take in a different spiritual system, for instance, when you believe in God, when you assert a creator God, you can ask the same question, why is there God? Why is there God? What made God? It just is, right?
Okay.
So then the mind, yeah, it's like this age-old question, right? It's like, where's their beginning? Why? Who made this up? Well, there's no one who made it up. It just is. And of course, it's a question that is valid, but don't spend too much time on it. Why? Because it's this old story that you've heard. I'm sure you've heard it. It's like someone shoots an arrow, right? Shoots you with an arrow. And
no, I'm doing the two things parallel.
And you're like,
in a way, I guess I'm doing the two things parallel, you know. I try to understand why and what's the source, but parallel to that, of course, I'm trying the best that I can, you know, to take care of my mind.
Yeah, no, Maya, I know. It's not, it's just this story. Like, of course, it's only secondary, and at some point we'll understand. I think our mind right now, okay, maybe I'll say it this way. Our mind right now is very limited. Our understanding is very limited. To understand what a Buddha is like, that's like a 5-year-old trying to understand what is the emotional world of an astrophysicist, right? What are these highest physicists, like a Nobel Peace Prize winning scientist? A 5-year-old. Is it possible to understand? Yes, but not with the mind of a 5-year-old. Okay. Right? We have to make our mind more flexible enough to understand these things. And you know how flexible your mind has become from the first time you heard about emptiness and now. What a difference, right? I mean, hearing it the first time, hearing it the second time, we think that the object becomes clearer. Yes, it does, because the mind has expanded. It's become more flexible. And things that previously we couldn't know, we now understand. So right now, the answer to your question, first of all, it's not that important, but it's still a question, but it's like a 5-year-old trying to understand. I think those are answers we'll get automatically as a side effect. Yeah. So maybe that helps for the time being, to wait until the time has come. Oh, I understand it, because I have no answer to that, right? And the Buddha would. But again, no matter what the Buddha would say, you'd be like, what? Right? Okay. So.
Okay, thank you.
But I think the most important things that are important for us right now to expand this mind, all this is there. Emptiness, we can all understand. Right? Yeah. Okay.
Intellectually, anyway.
Pardon?
For now, try to understand it intellectually. Like.
Of course. Yeah. I mean, of course, we can all understand, doesn't mean we all understand it, including myself, no way. But every time we think about it, it gets us closer, and so forth.
Okay, thank you so much.
Okay, you're welcome. All right, so it doesn't seem there are any questions. I know it's a little bit complicated, this idea, but maybe it isn't so complicated after all. It's just this naming is so weird. 5 skandhas and then 12 sense sources, and then included in the 18 constituents are the 12, but you just give them another name and add 6 other ones. That's really what it is. All right. And the words here, it's also like they don't enumerate these 18. There's no I element and so on, up to no mind element. Those are the 12 sense sources, all the way up to I consciousness and so forth, until no mental consciousness, right? It's just mentioning 3 of those 18 and saying, well, the rest, none of those exist inherently, okay, without enumerating, without individually mentioning them. Okay, so that part therefore says there's no inherently existent 5 aggregates, there's no inherently existent 12 sense sources, and there's no inherently existent 18 constituents. But conventionally, of course, they're there. And because of them, they explain our process of being who we are and experiencing what we experience. And then next time, we'll speak more specifically about those 12 links. And we're slowly moving towards the end. Oh yeah, actually, today we were a little quicker. All right. So I want to do a meditation. We've got 16 minutes left, unless there's another question. No, it doesn't seem there is. Is there? Okay. All right. So there's hope we'll actually finish in time today. Okay. So let's do a little meditation on what we've learned today. Okay. And again, we start as usual with breathing meditation. And so, as Avalokiteshvara has explained, there is no inherent I, and there is no inherent body or any of the other mental aggregates. They're merely labeled on the basis of parts that are other than themselves. The I is labeled on parts, on the basis of parts that are not an I. The body is merely labeled on the basis of parts that are not the body. And so forth. That doesn't mean that they're totally non-existent. for they exist as conventional, functioning entities. And it's not understanding that the I and the aggregates are merely labeled. That we are in samsara. So, what is samsara? The 5 aggregates. What experiences samsara? The 5 aggregates. And how does that happen? Through the 12 sense sources, and more specifically, the 18 constituents. So, through the 5 sense powers, the mental sense power, and then their corresponding objects, visual form, sound, and so forth, all the way up to phenomena. There are then the 6 types of consciousness. So, our reality are those 6 types of awareness with their corresponding objects. These 6 consciousnesses, though, they depend on the 12 sense sources, but all those exist totally subjectively. And now the only way in which we can experience anything is through those 6 consciousnesses that we engage in actions of body, speech, and mind. With the mental consciousness being the principal mind, the motivating force. With each mental event, leaving behind karmic imprints, as well as the physical, non-revelatory residue of actions of speech, body. Creating our future experiences. Positive, negative, as well as neutral experiences. Yet all those, not to forget, are merely labeled. Since none of the 5 aggregates exists inherently. There are no objective, inherently existent 12 sense sources. Nor are they inherently existent constituents. no karmic causes, and no inherent karmic results. And so now, in conclusion, whatever feeling has arisen as a result of your analytical meditation on your own personal samsara, and so forth, spend a few moments, just focus on that feeling and allow for it to sink deeper. Now let's, of course, also dedicate whatever virtue we've accumulated today. That although things don't exist inherently, nonetheless they do exist conventionally, and so to dedicate towards the well-being, in particular of the people in Israel experiencing pandemic, second wave of the pandemic, high unemployment, and all the other problems, not just in Israel, but all over the world. To dedicate whatever positive energy we've created today towards the well-being of all these people, but of course also towards our own enlightenment. May this become one of the causes that we're able to generate great compassion, great wisdom, so that we're able to attain the purified mind of the Buddha for the welfare of all sentient beings. And with this motivation, let's read the prayer, the dedication prayer, Shantideva's prayer. May all beings everywhere, plagued by sufferings of body and mind, obtain an ocean of happiness and joy by virtue of my merits. May no living creature suffer, commit evil, or ever fall ill. May no one be afraid or belittled with a mind weighed down by depression. May the blind see forms and the deaf hear sounds. May those whose bodies are worn with toil be restored on finding repose. May the naked find clothing and the hungry find food. May the thirsty find water and delicious drinks. May the poor find wealth. Those weak with sorrow find joy. May the hopeless find hope, constant happiness and prosperity. May there be timely rains and bountiful harvests. May all the medicines be effective and wholesome prayers bear fruit. May all who are sick and ill quickly be freed from their ailments, Whatever diseases there are in the world, may they never occur again. May the frightened cease to be afraid, and those bound to be freed. May the powerless find power, and the people think of benefiting each other. For as long as space remains, for as long as sentient beings remain, until then may I too remain to dispel the misery of sentient beings. Okay, great. Now, well, for this coming week, to reflect upon your own reality, mind, and body, and just get a sense of how they're basically these sense sources, the 18 constituents, and their interaction being responsible for our experiences, karmic experiences leading to further karmic actions and so forth. So to take a moment every now and then and just kind of bring to mind that process to the best of your ability. And if you can, of course, remember it's merely labeled on the basis of parts that are other than themselves. Okay. All right, that's a big one. 12 sense sources and 18 constituents to think of. And if it gets too complicated, well, the 5 aggregates. All right, great. That should do. And I see you again next week. Have a great week.
Thank you very much, Geshe.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.